She told me she was single. Then her husband showed up. Part 1. I met Olivia on a rainy Thursday night at a bar downtown. She was sitting alone, stirring the ice in her glass, her dark eyes flickering under the dim light. I wasn't planning on talking to anyone. I had just stopped by for a drink after work. But there was something about her. The way she held herself, poised yet distant, like someone waiting for a train that never arrived. "Rough night?" I asked, sliding onto the stool beside her. She smiled, soft but tired. "Something like that." We talked. We laughed. She told me she was single, had been for a while, and was just trying to move on from a bad relationship. I didn't push for details. All I knew was that I liked her. One drink turned into 2, then 3. By the time the bartender called last rounds, she was leaning into me, her fingers grazing my arm, her perfume clouding my thoughts. "Want to get out of here?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through half-open curtains. Olivia lay beside me, her dark hair splayed across my pillow. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then she sat up suddenly, eyes wide with panic. "What's wrong?" I asked. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing her phone from the nightstand. "I have to go," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "Wait, what?" "Olivia, what's going on?" She was already pulling on her jeans. I can't explain right now. Just forget last night, okay?" "Forget last night?" Not a chance. She rushed out the door before I could stop her. I sat there, confused and slightly hungover, staring at the space where she had just been. Something wasn't right, and I was about to find out why. That afternoon, I was back at my apartment when someone knocked on the door. Hard. I opened it. Standing there was a man in his mid-30s, dressed in a suit, his jaw clenched tight. His eyes, cold and unreadable, locked onto mine. "Are you James Carter?" he asked, voice low. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Yeah, who's asking?" The man took a step closer. "I'm Olivia's husband." For a moment, my brain refused to process what I had just heard. Her husband? That couldn't be right. Olivia said she was single. She wasn't married. And yet, here he was. The man standing in my doorway looked like the kind of guy you didn't want to mess with. Sharp suit, clean-shaven, but with an edge, like he was one bad day away from losing control. His eyes bore into mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to fear. "I think you've got the wrong person," I said carefully, keeping my tone neutral. "I don't think so," he shot back. "You were with Olivia last night, weren't you?" I hesitated, and that was enough of an answer. His jaw tensed. "How long has this been going on?" My stomach twisted. This wasn't some jealous ex. This was her actual husband, and judging by the look in his eyes, he wasn't here for a friendly chat. "I didn't know," I said quickly. "She told me she was single. If I'd known she was married, I never would have—" He took a step closer, and I instinctively backed up. "You didn't know?" he repeated, his voice quieter now. I shook my head. "I swear, man. She told me she wasn't seeing anyone." For a few tense seconds, he just stared at me, like he was trying to decide if he believed me. Then, to my surprise, he exhaled and rubbed a hand over his face. "Of course she did," he muttered. That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" He let out a humorless chuckle. "Because that's what she does." Something in his voice sent a chill down my spine. "Wait," I said slowly, my heart picking up speed. "She's done this before?" He met my eyes, and in that moment I saw something I wasn't expecting. Pain. "Yes," he said, "more times than I can count." I motioned for him to come inside, and to my surprise, he did. I wasn't sure why I let him in. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I just didn't want to deal with this in the hallway. But either way, I had a feeling this was only the beginning. He sat down on my couch, clasping his hands together as if trying to hold himself together. "We've been married for 6 years," he started. And for the first few, I thought we were happy. But then, things started changing. She started staying out late, making excuses, and then I found out she was cheating. My stomach turned. I caught her the first time a year ago, he continued. She swore it was a mistake, that she'd never do it again. I believed her. He laughed bitterly. Idiot move. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? She has a pattern, he went on. She meets someone, tells them she's single, plays the part perfectly. Then, when she's had her fun, she disappears. And just like that, everything clicked. Her reluctance to talk about her past. Her sudden panic this morning. The way she ran out like she was being chased. I had been played. You're not the first guy, he said, watching my reaction. And I doubt you'll be the last. Anger simmered in my chest, not just at her, but at myself for being so blind. So, what now? I asked, my voice tight. Are you here to fight me? To warn me? What do you want? He leaned forward, his eyes serious. I want your help. I blinked. My help? Yes, he said, because this time I'm not letting her get away with it. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and unexpected. You want my help? I repeated, trying to process what he was saying. The man across from me, Olivia's husband, nodded slowly, his face a mask of frustration and resolve. I'm not going to let her get away with this again, he said, his voice low but steady. I know she's been lying to you. And she's been lying to me for years, but I've had enough. I wasn't sure what kind of help he wanted. Part of me still couldn't believe what was happening. So, what? You want me to help you catch her in the act? I asked, my tone skeptical. He leaned back on the couch, eyes narrowing. Not exactly. I've already confronted her a few times, but she's always so convincing. I need to know where she's going, what she's doing when she's not with me. I need proof, solid proof that she's been cheating again. I swallowed hard. You want me to spy on her? He didn't hesitate. Yes, I know it's a lot to ask, but I can't do this alone anymore. I'm done being the fool. I stared at him for a long moment, trying to digest what he was asking of me. A part of me felt sorry for the guy. He didn't deserve to be in this situation. But another part of me felt a strange sense of loyalty to Olivia. Even though I'd only known her for a short time, something about her seemed off. But was I really willing to get involved in this mess? I don't know, I said slowly. I don't want to get caught in the middle of your marriage problems. He sighed and rubbed his temples. I get it. I do. But think about it. She lied to you. She lied to me. Don't you want to know who she really is? The question hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the lies, the games. It was about finding out what kind of person Olivia really was. I'll help you, I said, finally making up my mind. His face softened, though there was still a hard edge to his expression. Thank you, he said quietly. I know this isn't easy, but I'll make it worth your while. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the truth. We spent the next hour putting together a plan. His name was Daniel, by the way. He was a lawyer, one who had clearly seen enough of the ugly side of relationships to know how to play his cards. He told me that Olivia usually went out late in the evenings, around the time she got off work. She often claimed to be meeting friends, but Daniel had caught her in lies about where she was going more than once. We'll need to be discreet, he said. If she even gets a hint that I'm suspicious, she'll shut me out completely. I don't want her to know you're involved until we have the evidence. It was a good plan. Too good, if I'm being honest. Part of me was afraid that somewhere along the way, I'd end up as nothing more than a pawn in Daniel's game. But it was too late to back out now. That evening, I followed Olivia. She didn't act any differently than usual. She got dressed, tossed her purse over her shoulder, and left her apartment. I waited a few minutes, then started my car and followed her, keeping a careful distance. At first, she just drove through the city, seemingly aimless, But then she took a turn onto a quieter street, one I didn't recognize. I followed her into an upscale apartment complex. She parked her car and went inside without looking back. I waited for what felt like an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest. Then, to my shock, a man appeared from the building. He was tall, dark-haired, and as Olivia approached him, he smiled warmly. They hugged, long, lingering. And when they kissed, I felt my stomach drop to my feet. This was it. This was the proof Daniel had wanted. But I wasn't sure what to do next. I couldn't just walk up and confront her. Not yet. I needed to get more details. As I sat there watching them, I realized that Olivia wasn't just playing Daniel. She was playing both of us. And that was something I hadn't prepared for. The man took her hand, and they walked into the building together. I sat there for a few more minutes, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't getting out of this without getting hurt. I sat in my car, the engine idling quietly, as I stared at the building where Olivia had disappeared with the stranger. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind running through the last few hours. I had agreed to help Daniel, to get to the bottom of Olivia's lies, but I wasn't prepared for the emotional roller coaster I was now riding. Seeing Olivia with that man, that kiss, they weren't just friends. There was something deeper there, something far more intimate than she had let on. I thought back to last night, to the way she had laughed and smiled, how easy it was to be around her. She had seemed so real, so authentic, and now I realized it had all been an act. I had to get more information. I couldn't leave it at just seeing them kiss. But how far was I willing to go? Was I just a bystander in someone else's drama? Or had I stepped into a mess I should have avoided? I wasn't sure anymore. But I knew one thing. I wasn't about to walk away without the truth. I waited in my car, parked a few blocks away. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the building's lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the street. I didn't know how long I could stay here, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I watched as Olivia and the man emerged from the building sometime later. They were talking quietly, heads close together. My heart pounded again. What were they discussing? What if they saw me? I ducked down, keeping the rearview mirror in my line of sight to watch them leave. They walked towards the car parked in front of the building, and the man opened the passenger side door for her. She got in without a second thought, and they drove off. I followed them at a safe distance, my pulse quickening with every turn they took. After several minutes, they arrived at a secluded spot, a park, quiet and dark, away from the busy streets. Olivia and the man parked the car and got out. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I knew I needed answers. I pulled over a few blocks away, turned off my car, and got out cautiously, trying not to draw attention to myself. I waited for them to go inside a small building near the park. It was an old, run-down place. Nothing fancy, just a simple structure with a few broken windows. The kind of place you wouldn't look twice at if you didn't know what to look for. I stayed hidden in the shadows, watching. The door creaked open, and Olivia stepped inside, followed by the man. The door clicked shut behind them. I approached the building slowly, carefully, trying not to make any noise. Every step felt like it echoed in my chest. Then, as I crouched down by a corner, I heard voices through the cracks in the walls. I held my breath and pressed my ear against the cold, damp bricks. "Are you sure about this?" the man asked, his voice tense. "I'm sure," Olivia replied, her tone colder than I expected. "But you need to be patient. We can't rush things." "Patience? You've been saying that for months, Olivia," he snapped. "I can't keep doing this. You promised me we'd go public soon." "I know," she sighed, and I could hear her pacing. "But Daniel's getting suspicious. I can't afford to make a mistake now." My blood ran cold. They were talking about Daniel, the very man who had asked me to spy on his wife. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Had this all been part of some larger game she was playing? Was she using both of us? "Then make it happen," the man urged. I can't wait forever. You know what I want. You'll get what you want, Olivia said, but there was a strange edge to her voice, one I couldn't quite place. The conversation paused for a moment, and then I heard the soft sound of a kiss. Gentle, but purposeful. I stepped back quickly, retreating to my car before they could hear me. My mind was racing. I had to get back to Daniel. This wasn't just about her cheating. There was something bigger going on here. Something darker. The next morning, I met Daniel at a cafe, my mind still reeling from what I had overheard. He was already sitting at a corner table, eyes scanning the room like he was waiting for someone. When he saw me approach, he stood up, his face tight with expectation. So, what did you find out? I sat down, trying to control my breathing. She's with someone. A man. Daniel's eyes hardened, his hands balling into fists. I knew it. Yeah, but it's worse than you think. He raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I told him everything. About the park, the building, the conversation I had overheard. I left out the details of their kiss, though. I didn't think it would help anyone to make things even more personal. When I finished, Daniel just sat there, staring at me, as if trying to process it all. So, she's been playing me this whole time? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I think so. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly overwhelmed. I don't know what to do with this information. I didn't know either. But as I watched him, I realized one thing. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about uncovering the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Olivia had been lying to both of us, playing a game where everyone else was a pawn. And it was time to end the game. The air between Daniel and I was thick with tension. I could see the anger in his eyes, the way his fists clenched and unclenched as he processed everything I had just told him. Olivia had played us both, and now we were caught in a web of lies that was only getting more tangled. So what now? Daniel finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. He was looking at me like I was the one with the answers. But the truth was, I wasn't sure where we went from here. I think we need to confront her, I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could fully think them through. We need to expose what she's been doing. Everything she's hiding. Daniel nodded, though the idea seemed to weigh heavily on him. And what do we say to her? How do we get her to confess? I had no idea. But we couldn't just sit here doing nothing. Every moment we waited, Olivia was one step ahead of us, weaving her lies and plotting her next move. I had to take action. The plan was simple. Meet Olivia, catch her off guard, and get the truth. But nothing was ever that simple with her. We agreed to confront her at a cafe later that afternoon. Daniel would be there, and I would be in the background listening. I was still trying to figure out my role in all of this, but I couldn't walk away now. I was too far in. When Olivia walked into the cafe, her eyes immediately found us. She hesitated at the door, taking in the sight of Daniel sitting across from me, his face set in stone, and me, trying to look as casual as possible, though my heart was racing. She walked over slowly, her smile faltering as she approached. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice light, like nothing was wrong. "Sit down, Olivia," Daniel said, his tone low. I watched her closely as she slid into the chair across from him. For a moment, she seemed to hesitate, like she wasn't sure if she should be worried or not. "What's this about?" she asked, still pretending to be calm, but there was a slight tremble in her voice. Daniel didn't waste time. "We know about the man, Olivia. The one you've been seeing behind my back. The one you told me wasn't a threat." Her eyes widened for the briefest moment, but she quickly masked it with a practiced smile. "I don't know what you're talking about." I could feel the tension building, and I knew that this was the moment. She could either keep lying or she could crack. "Don't play games with me," Daniel said, his voice suddenly sharp. "We know everything. You've been seeing him for months. And don't tell me it's just some innocent friendship. We both know it's more than that." Olivia's face paled, but she didn't break. She was a master at hiding her emotions, but I could see the fear flicker in her eyes. She was losing control. "I don't know who told you these lies," she said, her voice slightly shaking now. "But I'm not doing anything wrong. You're just overreacting. You always overreact, Daniel." I could tell she was trying to regain control, trying to spin this back into her favor. But Daniel wasn't buying it. "Olivia," he said, leaning forward, his voice low and deadly serious. "You've been lying to me for over a year. I know about the late-night meetings, the secret phone calls, the man you're seeing behind my back. I know everything." Olivia's composure finally cracked. Her shoulders slumped and she looked away for a second, gathering her thoughts. I could see the calculation in her eyes as she realized her games were over. "You don't understand," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted to hurt you, Daniel. It's just, I needed something more. You were always so busy. You didn't see me anymore." There was a vulnerability in her voice that surprised me, but I didn't trust it. She was trying to manipulate the situation, trying to make Daniel feel guilty, but he wasn't falling for it. "You didn't think I noticed?" he said, his voice cold. "You didn't think I could see how distant you were? You didn't think I could feel it when you started lying to me?" Olivia fell silent for a moment, her eyes flickering with regret. But then, she looked up at him, her gaze sharp and calculating once more. "I did it because I needed to feel alive again. I needed something exciting, something that wasn't so boring." She looked over at me now, her eyes narrowing. "I never meant for you to get involved, James. But now that you're here..." She trailed off, a strange look crossing her face. I didn't like where this was going. "Olivia, stop," Daniel said, his voice rising slightly. "You're not going to turn this on him. He didn't do anything. You did this. You chose this." I could see the guilt in her eyes, but there was also something else. A flicker of defiance, a readiness to fight back. "I did what I had to do," she said, standing up abruptly. "You don't get it, Daniel. You never did. And now it's too late to fix anything." I stood up too, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me. I wasn't just caught in the middle anymore. This wasn't about revenge or catching someone in the act. This was about the truth, and Olivia was fighting to keep it buried. "Olivia, this isn't over," Daniel said, his voice low but full of resolve. "You've crossed the line one too many times." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving both of us staring after her. As Olivia's figure disappeared into the crowd, I looked at Daniel. His face was a mix of exhaustion and something darker. Anger, frustration, maybe even betrayal. He had trusted her, loved her, and she had shattered that trust in ways he couldn't even begin to process. I wasn't sure what came next for him, or for me, but one thing was clear. This wasn't the end of the story. Olivia was still out there, and the truth was far from over. We had uncovered some of the lies, but there were still more to unravel. And I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen when all of her secrets finally came to light? The cafe was quiet now, save for the soft clinking of cups and distant chatter. Daniel and I sat in silence, the weight of the confrontation with Olivia hanging over us like a storm cloud. I watched him, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup absently, his mind clearly miles away. "Are you okay?" I asked, breaking the silence. He looked up, blinking, as though he had forgotten I was there. "I don't even know what to think anymore," he said, his voice raw. "She's lied to me for so long, and now I'm seeing who she really is. But I still love her. I don't know how to stop loving someone who's done this to you." I could hear the conflict in his voice. As much as he wanted to be angry, as much as he wanted to feel justified, there was still a part of him that was holding on to the woman he had once known. "I get it," I said quietly. "But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the damage is too much to fix." Daniel didn't respond right away. His gaze wandered to the window, where the light from the streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk. "What do I do now?" he asked, more to himself than to me. I didn't have an answer. I hadn't signed up for this after all. I was just a bystander, someone who'd been dragged into a broken marriage, hoping to uncover the truth but never anticipating how messy things would get. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Over the next few days, things got even messier. Daniel's calls to Olivia went unanswered, and she wasn't responding to his texts. It was clear she was avoiding him, but what was she hiding now? Then, on the third day after our confrontation, Daniel came to me with something new. "I need your help," he said, his voice strained. "I've got to find out where she's really been going. She's been lying about meeting her friends, but I know she's meeting him again. I need you to follow her." At first, I was hesitant. We had already uncovered so much, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. I didn't want to let him down, but I wasn't sure I could keep doing this. However, I couldn't walk away now. Not when I was so deep in it. "Okay," I said reluctantly. "I'll help, but this is the last time." I followed Olivia again, the routine now familiar. She left her apartment, her steps quick and purposeful. I stayed a block behind, keeping my distance but never losing sight of her. She drove for about 20 minutes, then stopped at a secluded area on the outskirts of town near a forested park. I pulled over a short distance away and waited. I wasn't sure what to expect, but as soon as Olivia got out of her car, I felt my heart drop. This wasn't just a casual meeting. The man from before, the one I had seen her with in the park, was there, standing by a black SUV. Olivia didn't even hesitate. She walked up to him, and they exchanged a few quick words before she climbed into the SUV. The man drove off without even glancing in my direction. I waited for a few moments, my heart pounding. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading. I had to know what was going on. I followed them again, this time much more carefully. They drove for another 20 minutes and eventually arrived at a hotel. A secluded, rundown motel hidden away in the middle of nowhere. I stayed a safe distance, my car parked around the corner. I watched as Olivia and the man checked into a room together. They didn't speak a word as they disappeared into the hotel lobby side by side. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Olivia wasn't just having an affair, she was living a double life. She was meeting this man regularly, sneaking off with him in the middle of the night, and hiding everything from Daniel. I sat in my car for a while, letting the truth sink in. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a whole web of lies, one that went deeper than I had ever imagined. I called Daniel, my fingers trembling as I dialed. The phone rang several times before he picked up, his voice hoarse on the other end. "James, what's going on? Did you find something?" "I did," I said, trying to steady my breath. "She's with him. She went to a motel with him, Daniel. She's been seeing him for months. This isn't just a fling. She's living a whole other life behind your back." There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear Daniel's heart break as the truth hit him. He had suspected it, but now it was undeniable. "I need to see her," he said finally, his voice tight with emotion. "Where are they?" I gave him the address to the motel. I knew what was coming. He was going to confront her, and this time I wasn't sure if there would be any going back. "I'll be there soon," Daniel said, his voice hardening. "Thank you, James. I don't know how to repay you for all of this." "You don't need to," I said softly. "Just make sure you get the closure you need." I hung up, staring at the motel in the distance. I knew this was the end of the line for Olivia and Daniel, but it wasn't just the end for them. It was the end of the game I had been unwillingly pulled into. It was over. Want to know how Daniel's final confrontation with Olivia goes? Let me know if you want to see the conclusion. The night felt like it had been stretched out of shape. Each passing second weighed on me like a lead anchor, as though the world around me had slowed down, waiting for the inevitable collision. I had told Daniel everything. He knew the truth now, and there was no turning back. I sat in my car outside the motel, my eyes fixed on the door where Olivia and her lover had gone in. Daniel had said he was on his way. I had to keep watching. The anticipation was unbearable. It wasn't long before I saw Daniel's car pull into the parking lot. He parked a few spaces away from mine, not wanting to draw attention. He got out and stood by his car for a moment, looking up at the building, as if gathering the strength to face her. I could see the tightness in his shoulders, the set of his jaw. He wasn't just angry. He was broken, and I couldn't blame him. He was about to face the woman he loved, the woman who had lied to him for so long. I swallowed hard, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I watched him approach the motel entrance. I couldn't hear anything from where I was parked, but I could see Daniel walk into the hotel lobby. For a moment, he disappeared from my view. I leaned forward, eager to know what was happening, but afraid of what I might hear. Then, the door to the motel room opened. My breath caught in my throat. Olivia stepped out, her eyes wide with shock when she saw Daniel standing there. He didn't even give her a moment to speak. He took a step forward, his voice low but filled with the kind of rage that only comes from a deep betrayal. "Olivia," he said, "we need to talk, now." She tried to compose herself, but her hands shook as she stepped back, clearly unprepared for this confrontation. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "Don't act surprised," Daniel replied, his voice clipped. "I know everything. About you and him. About the lies, the meetings, the secret life you've been living behind my back." Her face blanched, the color draining from her cheeks. For a moment, it seemed like she was going to break, but then she straightened up, her gaze hardening. "Daniel, please," Olivia said, her voice trembling. "I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you. You just weren't there for me anymore. You were too busy with work. You didn't see me. You didn't see us. You think I didn't notice?" Daniel's voice was laced with bitterness now. "You think I didn't see how you pulled away? How you stopped being there for me? You were so consumed with whatever you were doing that you didn't care about this marriage anymore. You didn't care about us." Olivia's shoulders slumped, but she quickly masked it with a haughty expression. "You don't understand, Daniel. I had to find something. I needed to feel alive again. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when it wasn't." "Pretending?" Daniel spat, the hurt in his voice clear. "You've been lying to me for months. You didn't give me a chance to fix things. You didn't even try." "I was trying," she said, her voice cracking. "But you never listened. I thought you'd never understand. He listened to me. He made me feel heard." Her words hung in the air like poison. Daniel stood still for a moment, staring at her as if trying to process everything. Then his shoulders slumped, his anger giving way to exhaustion. "I didn't deserve this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't deserve to be betrayed like this." Olivia opened her mouth to speak, but he held up his hand, stopping her. "No," he said, his tone final. "It's over. You made your choice." She took a step forward, pleading. "Daniel, please, I didn't mean for it to end like this. I was just lost." But it was too late. Daniel had already made up his mind. "I'm done," he said, his voice cold. "I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me. You've broken everything. There's nothing left to salvage." With that, Daniel turned and walked away. I stayed hidden, watching as Daniel left the motel, his steps heavy, his face pale. He didn't look back. Olivia stood in the doorway, her body trembling, the reality of what she had lost settling in. I watched as she slowly closed the door behind her, her hand lingering on the knob for a moment. I could see her shoulders shaking as she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. But there was no escaping the truth now. The life she had built, the lies she had told, had all come crumbling down. After everything had settled, I met Daniel at a park near the motel. We sat on a bench, both of us silent for a while, as if trying to make sense of what had just happened. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice softer now, tinged with sadness. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her, James. I thought we were in this together, but she wasn't the person I thought she was. I didn't know what to say. How do you comfort someone who has just lost everything they believed in? You don't have to forgive her, I said quietly. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away. Daniel nodded, his eyes distant. I just never saw it coming. I thought we were okay. I thought she loved me. She did, I said, though I wasn't sure how much truth there was in that anymore. But love isn't just about feeling good in the moment. It's about trust. And she lost that with you. He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. I'm done with all of it. With her. With the lies. With everything. I could see the weight of his decision. The pain was still there, but it was beginning to shift into something else. Something that looked like resolution. I'm sorry, man, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. But you'll get through this. You'll move on. You just need time. Yeah, he replied, his voice steady now. I'll move on. As we sat there, the sun dipping below the horizon, I couldn't help but think that this wasn't just the end of Olivia and Daniel's story. It was the end of a chapter in all our lives. I had gotten involved in something I never expected, something that revealed how messy love, lies, and betrayal can be. But now, it was over. Olivia's web of deceit had unraveled, and Daniel could finally start healing. The truth had come out, and sometimes that's all you need to begin moving forward. Thank you for following this story to its conclusion. I hope you enjoyed the twists and turns. Let me know if you want to explore more stories like this. As Daniel and I sat in the park, the sounds of the evening seemed distant, like the world had gone quiet, holding its breath for what would happen next. Daniel stared out at the horizon, the last light of the day fading behind the trees. I could tell he was still processing everything, still trying to make sense of the mess Olivia had left behind. And I was too. Something about all of this didn't sit right with me. Olivia's actions, her lies, the sudden intensity of her need for excitement, none of it added up in a way that felt logical. There had to be something more. I'm sorry, man, I said, trying to comfort him. You'll heal. You'll get through this. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He simply nodded, though it didn't seem like he truly heard me. His thoughts were elsewhere. It was then that I saw something in the distance, a figure standing by the edge of the park. I wasn't sure who it was at first, but the shape was too familiar. My heart skipped a beat. It was Olivia. But how? She'd just been at the motel with him, the man she had been seeing behind Daniel's back. What was she doing here, miles away from where we had last seen her? I stood up without thinking, instinctively moving toward her. Wait, what are you doing? Daniel's voice cut through my thoughts, but I didn't have an answer. Something inside me urged me to go after her, to understand what was going on. As I got closer, Olivia turned. Her face was pale, but her expression was unreadable. She was alone. You shouldn't be here, I said, my voice barely a whisper, unsure of what this encounter was supposed to be. Olivia didn't look surprised to see me, but there was a flicker of something dark in her eyes. She wasn't acting like herself, like the woman I'd come to know over the last few months. She was distant, almost cold. You need to leave, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. You don't understand what's happening. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, something caught my eye. A shadow moving across the field behind her. A figure, much larger than Olivia, stepped out from the trees. The same man I had seen her with before. The one she'd been lying about. The one who had played a part in her web of deceit. But something was wrong. He wasn't alone. There were two other men stepping out from behind the trees, their faces masked. Their presence was unnerving, like they were part of something larger, something much darker than I had ever imagined. Olivia? What is this? I asked, taking a step back, the weight of realization slowly sinking in. Who are these people? She took a step toward me, her face now cold and detached. You don't need to know, she said, her words more like an order than a plea. I watched as she turned away, her back to me, and without another word, she walked toward the men. Olivia, wait, what's going on? I called out, but it was too late. She was already disappearing into the shadows, her figure swallowed up by the darkening park. I stood there for a long moment, the uncertainty weighing heavily on me. The reality of what I had seen, what I had stumbled into, wasn't just about Olivia's betrayal. There was something deeper, something far more sinister at play. I turned to find Daniel, but when I looked back toward the park entrance, he was gone. He had left. Had he seen something I hadn't? Did he know more about Olivia than he had let on? Was this all just the beginning? As I stood there in the quiet of the park, a shiver ran down my spine. There were too many unanswered questions. The truth had been elusive, slipping through my fingers at every turn. Olivia had been hiding something far darker than a simple affair. And now, I was tangled in a mystery that seemed far from over. In the distance, I could hear the soft hum of traffic. But it wasn't the sound of the world moving forward. It was the sound of something coming for me.